The surveillance footage timestamps 5:34 a.m. A Toyota Camry makes a right-hand turn, blinker on, speed controlled. Nothing out of place. 40 seconds later, the same camera catches the sound of impact before it catches the car. 100 miles per hour. No brake. No swerve. Just a wall, and then silence, and then nothing. 2 people in that car did not survive. The one behind the wheel did. What happened in those 40 seconds between that ordinary right turn and that wall has divided an entire community, collapsed 2 families, and produced a Netflix documentary that millions of people watched with their hands over their mouths. The black box doesn't lie. But the black box alone doesn't tell you everything, because the question at the center of this case was never what happened. It was why. And that question leads somewhere far more uncomfortable than a prison sentence. This is what investigators call a case of deliberate acceleration. DaVon Flanigan was 19 years old. His mother, Jamie Flanigan, described him in a Cuyahoga County courtroom as a man with a heart of gold, the kind of person who became a protector before he had the chance to become anything else. He and his sisters had been adopted together, and he was the gravitational center of that sibling bond. His sister told the judge, "He was the one who picked me up when I fell." Dominic Russo was 20. His mother had not just lost a son. She had lost someone she considered family, shared between 2 households in the ordinary way that happens when a teenager's girlfriend becomes part of the furniture of daily life. She called Dominic the air McKenzie breathed. The families knew each other. They spent every day together. McKenzie Shirilla was 17, and she was driving. The early morning of July 31, 2022, in Strongsville, Ohio, started as the kind of night teenagers have been having since they were teenagers, late, a little reckless, fueled by whatever teenagers are fueled by. The route home ran through an industrial parkway, quiet at that hour. Nothing about that moment would have looked, to anyone watching, like a moment about to become permanent. Here is the single weakness in the prosecution's case that the defense would later press hard. There were no eyewitnesses to what happened inside that car in the seconds before impact. Everything the prosecution built had to come from the physical record. The black box, the cameras, the crash reconstruction. The state had to prove intent without a single person who saw McKenzie's face at that moment. That's a genuine evidentiary gap. It is also, as this script will show, the gap that the black box closes. What the data recorder captured inside that Camry was this: the accelerator depressed completely for 5 seconds. Not a partial press. Not a tap. The floor, for 5 full seconds, in a straight line toward a fixed wall. No brake application. No steering correction. This is what investigators came to call deliberate acceleration, the framework that would define every argument in this courtroom. The defense claimed McKenzie had a medical condition, that she blacked out, that her body pressed the gas without her knowing. Here is what the state found. After the crash, McKenzie renewed her driver's license and checked the box confirming no medical conditions. Twice. Strongsville is a suburb of Cleveland, the kind of mid-sized Ohio city where high school relationships carry weight and everybody knows somebody's parents. In 2022, it was also a community with a highly active local social media presence, which meant that within hours of the crash, before families had been formally notified, before investigators had filed their first report, the footage and the rumors were already circulating. McKenzie survived the crash. She was taken to the hospital with serious injuries, underwent multiple surgeries, and was eventually released. What happened after her release is where this case acquired its public dimension. She appeared on TikTok, in one video saying, and this is documented, that she was just one of those girls that can do a lot of drugs and not die. 3 months after the crash, she attended a Halloween event and a concert. Her mother, Natalie Shirilla, would later tell the sentencing judge that she had encouraged McKenzie to go, that her daughter had spent 3 months in bed, crying, wearing Dominic's clothes, eating only the food he liked, keeping a shrine next to her bed with a light-up flower he had given her. That context did not reach the public. What reached the public was the image, a teenage girl, alive, at a party, while 2 people she had been driving were dead. Detective who of the Strongsville Police Department led the investigation. Months after the crash, he arrived at McKenzie's home to make the arrest himself. The footage from that arrest, McKenzie asking officers to be careful removing her bracelet, asking about her hair extensions, circulated widely, and the response was not sympathetic. But here is what deliberate acceleration demands, we ask. Was the public responding to evidence of guilt, or to evidence of a personality type they found offensive? That distinction matters, because one of them belongs in a courtroom and the other doesn't. Prosecutors said McKenzie had threatened, on prior occasions, to crash a car during arguments with Dominic. If that testimony holds, It doesn't just describe what happened on July 31st, it describes a pattern.
And patterns are not accidents. The case went to a bench trial. No jury.
One judge. That decision, made by the defense, is one of the most discussed strategic choices in the entire case. Legal analyst Vinnie Politan, who covered the proceedings extensively, noted that bench trials typically favor defendants when the judge has shown pretrial skepticism about the charges. The question he raised publicly was pointed. In a case this emotionally charged, with a defendant this publicly disliked, did the defense genuinely believe a judge would acquit? Or did they calculate that a jury would be worse? The prosecution's case rested on 3 pillars. First, the black box. The vehicle's event data recorder showed full throttle depression for 5 seconds, 0 brake application, 0 steering input. Crash reconstruction experts translated this into what the car was physically doing in those final moments. At 100 miles per hour, the decision not to brake is not a lapse, it is a commitment. Second, the surveillance footage. 2 cameras captured the Camry. The first showed a normal right-hand turn at 5:34 a.m., blinker engaged, controlled speed. The second camera, seconds later, caught what followed.
At the judge,
the sound of impact, the car pinned against the wall.
Like she was about to
the gap
walk out
between
of that
those 2
courtroom and grab dinner
recordings is where
with friends.
deliberate acceleration either
17-year-old
exists or
McKenzie
it doesn't.
Shirilla had convinced
Third,
herself she'd
the
beaten
prior
the system.
threats.
Her
Witness
lawyers
testimony
painted her as a
established that
heartbroken
McKenzie
teenager.
had,
The moment
in previous
McKenzie Shirilla
arguments with
realized her
Dominic,
lies
threatened to
couldn't
crash a
compete with
car.
cold, hard
Dr.
evidence.
Elizabeth
The moment
Sutter,
she
the
understood she
Cuyahoga
wasn't
County
going
medical
home.
examiner,
Not tonight.
confirmed the
Not
cause
for
and
the next
manner of death
15
for both
years.
victims.
2 young men
The
were
forensic
dead,
record
and the
left
proof
no
was all
ambiguity
right
about
there,
what the
on
crash did
video.
to the 2
This
passengers.
is the chilling case
The
of the
defense
teenager who
responded with
turned
the
her
medical
Toyota
condition
Camry
claim
into a
that McKenzie suffered from
3,500-pound
episodes
missile.
that could cause
And every single
unconsciousness
detail
while leaving
I'm
her
about
body
to show you
capable of
has been
maintaining
verified
physical
through
pressure
court
on the
records,
pedal.
police
The
reports,
judge would
and
address
trial
this claim
testimony.
directly at
If
sentencing,
you've never heard this story
noting
before,
that McKenzie
prepare
had twice
yourself.
denied
Because
any
what
medical
happened on a
condition when
quiet street
applying
in
for
Ohio
and
on
renewing
July
her driver's
31st,
license.
2022
No medical
will challenge
records,
everything
no
you think you
treating
know about
physician,
teenage
no
relationships,
documented history of any
premeditated
such
murder, and how
condition was
modern
ever entered
technology
into
can expose
evidence.
even the
The
most
judge also
carefully
noted
planned
something that
crime.
sits at the edge of this
There was
case like a
something else
question that never
investigators
fully
discovered
resolves.
that would prove
Even if
crucial to
McKenzie intended
understanding
to die in
McKenzie's
that
state of
crash,
mind
even
immediately
if this
after the
was,
crash.
in some form,
Something she
a
said where she
suicide
thought
attempt,
no one was paying
that
attention
does not
to her
constitute
exact
a defense
words.
to murder when
According to
others
medical
die in the
records that were read
execution of
aloud
that
during the
plan.
trial,
The judge
while
noted
McKenzie was being
McKenzie had
treated at the
chosen an
hospital,
obscure,
she made statements
previously
to medical
scouted
staff
route
that
through an
directly
industrial
contradicted her
parkway.
later claims of innocence.
Previously scouted.
Dr. Esther
That
Tseng,
single
a
phrase is
mental
either the
health
most
trauma
damning
surgeon who
detail
worked
in
on
the
McKenzie's
entire
medical care,
prosecution,
was called
or
to
an
testify
inference
about
too
what
far.
McKenzie told
Which
hospital
one it is
staff in
changes
those crucial
everything.
hours after
The
the crash.
geography of this case
When
is
the
specific
prosecution
and it
asked Dr.
matters.
Tseng to
The
read from the
industrial
medical
parkway
report,
in
the
Strongsville where the
courtroom
crash
heard McKenzie's
occurred is
own
not
words
the
from
through
just
route.
hours
It
after
does
the
not
crash.
connect major intersections. At 5:30 in the morning, there is no foot traffic, no other vehicles, no witnesses. The route from wherever they had been to wherever they were going did
Patient
not
then
require
became
this
tearful,
road.
processing
The judge's
heavy
finding
loss
that
and
it was
depression
previously
since her
scouted
accident.
was not
Patient shared
casual
feelings of
language.
grief,
It
guilt,
was a
and
factual
shame.
finding
Patient stated she
embedded
wanted
in the
to die
sentencing
and that it was
record
her fault
that
for killing
speaks
her
directly
boyfriend.
to premeditation.
Let that sink in
The
for a
idea
moment.
that deliberate
This wasn't
acceleration
something
was
said
not an
weeks or
impulse
months later
decision
when
made
she
in a
had
moment
time
of
to
rage,
think
but
about
something
legal
with
strategy.
geography attached
This
to
was
it.
McKenzie
The
hours
defense
after
never
the crash.
successfully
Her witty
rebutted
thoughts
this
about
finding.
death and
4
control
to 5
had been
minutes passed
documented
between
in
the
her own
crash and the
words
first
long before the
911
crash.
call. It was a passing Good Samaritan who eventually called for help. There were no residents nearby, no businesses open, no security personnel. The 2 victims, DaVon Flanigan and Dominic Russo, were dead at the scene. McKenzie survived. After the verdict, McKenzie's attorney declined public comment. Natalie Shirilla, McKenzie's mother, spoke at sentencing. Her testimony was the most emotionally complex moment in the entire proceeding. A mother who genuinely believed her daughter was innocent, who had encouraged the Halloween outing, who had commented on social media posts on McKenzie's behalf because she didn't want her daughter to come out of surgery and see herself being called a murderer. The judge interrupted her at one point. "I'm hearing an awful lot about your daughter. I'm not hearing very much about the 2 dead people." That exchange, documented in the court record, encapsulates the central tension this case has never resolved. The difference between grief for your child and acknowledgement of what your child did. The silence from McKenzie's own statement at sentencing was its own kind of evidence. She stood before the judge and read a few lines.
McKenzie,
she said she loved Dominic.
DaVon,
She said she wished she could remember.
we believe is
she did
Dominic,
not
is the
say,
third
"I
person.
caused this." She did not say, "I was wrong." She said she was heartbroken.
Last night.
And she thanked her family. And she sat down.
Just relax. Just hold on.
Dominic's
Just put stay seated. Just stay seated. Just hold on.
She showed
Hold
no
on. Hold on.
mercy
Just
on Dominic.
listen.
Nor did she on
Yes, just take a deep breath.
DaVon's sister said,
Christine,
she's always taken the easy way out.
Yeah, just
You
take a
should
deep
be
breath.
able to take the easy way out when it comes to murder. These are not opinions.
Right
These are
now,
statements
all we
delivered
know
under oath
is
in a
that
public
the driver
courtroom. by the people
Who's
who had known
McKenzie?
both victims and had
Is
watched
that not
Mackenzie's
true?
behavior in
Okay.
the months following the crash.
Just
They are
stay
part of
seated,
the
please.
official record of
Please,
this
just
case.
relax. Take a deep breath.
Mackenzie
That's right.
Shirilla
Deep
was
breath.
convicted of 4 counts of murder. She was also convicted of drug possession and
Mackenzie.
possessing criminal
Step out
tools.
for me.
The jury never heard those last 2 counts.
I'm Detective
Because there was
Jesus.
no
I'm the
jury,
one who's been
only a
investigating
judge,
the crash.
the same
You're under
judge who
arrest for
later called the
aggravated
crash
murder
literally
offense, too.
changed history.
Okay.
On the day of
Nobody's gonna ask you any
sentencing,
questions.
the judge did
Nobody's
not
gonna
speak
bother
like
you.
someone
Have your
performing
key, please.
justice.
Can
He
you
spoke
please be
like
careful
someone who
taking
had
this
spent
one off
months
so
with
it
this
doesn't break
evidence and
through.
arrived somewhere
Got
he
it.
could not
Got
be.
it.
He described, item by item, what Mackenzie had chosen.
Got it.
The date, specifically selected before her 18th birthday, which would have made her eligible for
Keep your
juvenile
hands right here.
proceedings. The route, previously scouted. The time of day. The target. The method. These were not findings of recklessness. They were findings of planning. The conviction on 4 counts of murder, 2 counts each for Dominic and DaVon under Ohio Revised Code 2903.02a, was a result of a bench trial in which the judge, sitting as the finder of fact, determined beyond a reasonable doubt that Mackenzie Shirilla acted purposefully. The sentence, 2 concurrent terms of 15 years to life, eligible for parole at age 33. The judge stated plainly that he did not believe she would be released at first eligibility.
Head going in.
Deliberate acceleration, as a framework for understanding this crime, reaches its full meaning here. It is not just about what the black box recorded. It is about the 5 seconds as a unit of decision-making. At 100 miles per hour, a vehicle covers approximately 730 feet in 5 seconds. That is more than 2 football fields. The foot did not slip. The foot did not hesitate. The foot stayed down. Capability translation. The absence of any steering correction over that distance at that speed is not consistent with panic, disorientation, or medical incapacitation. It is consistent with intent. Now the system fails, because this case exposes something the verdict doesn't fix. Mackenzie Shirilla was 17 years old when she committed these acts. She was charged as an adult. She was tried as an adult. The Ohio juvenile system had no role in this prosecution, and the sentencing judge specifically noted the selection of a date before her 18th birthday as evidence of premeditation, suggesting Mackenzie was aware of the jurisdictional line. That jurisdictional line is not a procedural footnote. It is a policy question that
Even after
Ohio
hearing days
and
of
most
evidence
states
about the
has
practice
never fully
runs, the
answered.
threats,
When
the
a
black
minor
box
commits an
data
act
showing
of lethal
deliberate
violence that a
acceleration
court
and
finds
the
to be
surveillance
premeditated,
footage,
what
Mackenzie's
does the
mother
juvenile
still called
system
it an
exist to
accident.
do? And who decided it
Legal
couldn't
observers
handle this?
noted that this
The
statement
Strongsville
provided
Police
insight
Department
into how
and Cuyahoga
Mackenzie may
County
have learned to
prosecutors made
avoid
the call to charge
accountability.
as an adult.
Even when faced
No
with
public
overwhelming
statement from the
evidence
Ohio
of
Department of
premeditated
Youth
murder,
Services
the family
addresses
continued
what,
to frame it
if
as an
any,
accident.
assessment was
The mother's
conducted of
statement
Mackenzie's
also
mental
revealed the
health
family's
history prior
plan
to
to
the
continue
decision to
fighting the
charge her
conviction.
as an adult.
And we're asking
That
please
question
have
has
the
not been
sentence
publicly
executed.
answered. The
Family
prior
home
threats to
office.
crash a car, documented
To
in witness
understand the full
testimony,
scope of Mackenzie's
existed before
deception,
July
we need to look
31st,
at how her story
2022.
changed over time,
No mental
and
health
how her own
intervention
words
is documented
ultimately
in the
convicted her.
record. No
Hours
family
after the
member
crash,
reported those
when she
threats
thought
to
she was
school
speaking
officials or
privately
law
to medical
enforcement.
staff, Mackenzie
The system
said
had
it
no
was her
mechanism
fault
to
for killing
receive
her
that
boyfriend.
information even if they
But
had.
by the time of her
The
trial,
Netflix
her story
documentary
had
titled The
completely
Crash
changed.
reopened this
She now
case for a
claimed
national
total memory
audience and
loss
produced a
maintained
second
it was
wave of
all an
public
accident.
argument that continues in comment sections
just
today.
kids being
The
kids?
documentary does
Is it
not offer
Dominic
new
grabbing
forensic
the steering
evidence.
wheel?
It offers
Is
a
it
different
Mackenzie
emotional
maybe
frame.
speeding and saying, "Oh my
Mackenzie
God,
as a
I got
teenager in a
this weight,
toxic
I'm coming up with
relationship.
this. I better do
Mackenzie as
something."
someone whose
She
social
goes like
media
that to
behavior was
avoid
weaponized
it.
against her in the court of
Not
public
people
opinion before the
with
court of
that
law ever
train
convened.
to avoid
That
it.
frame is not wrong.
Is it
The
sudden-
public response to her
sudden
TikTok
acceleration?
presence was disproportionate in its venom, and at least some of what was held against her in the public mind. The Halloween outing, the concert attended with Dominic's own cousin, is explainable in ways her mother attempted to explain. None of that evidence was before the judge. It was before Twitter. The judge was before the black box. What the documentary cannot change is the data. 5 seconds. Full throttle. No brakes. No steering. A previously scouted road. A date before her 18th birthday. A history of prior threats. Testified to under oath. A medical defense with no supporting documentation.
At
The
sentencing,
question
she
of
told
whether
the court,
justice was
"I
served
hope
will
one
not
day
be
you can
answered
see
until
I would
Mackenzie
never
Shirilla
let this
appears
happen
before
or
the
do it on
Ohio Parole
purpose.
Board at 33
I wish I
years
could
old.
remember what
At
happened."
that hearing, the families of
Meanwhile,
DaVon
her
Flanigan
social
and
media
Dominic
posts
Russo
from
will
before
have
the
the right
crash
to
told
speak.
yet another
The
story.
board will weigh
Posts
whatever
like, "I'm the one
evidence
you
of
died before,"
rehabilitation
suggested
exists
someone who
against
was
the facts that
comfortable with
sent
themes
her
of
there.
death and
Dominic's
control.
mother told the
And the
judge.
evidence from 2 weeks
Time
before
does
the
not
crash
heal this
showed her
wound.
making specific threats.
DaVon's mother told the
"I will
judge she
crash this
praised
car
daily for
right
strength.
now.
DaVon's
Put it
sister
all
was
together
18 years
and you
old
have
when
a
she
clear
stood up in
pattern."
that courtroom and
Mackenzie
said her
made
brother was
threats,
the only person
practiced
who had
the
stayed
route,
with her
carried
since
out
she
the
was born.
murder, initially
She is
admitted
living the
fault,
rest of her
then
life
spent
without
a year crafting a new
whatever
story
sentence
for
Mackenzie
trial.
serves. That is the permanent arithmetic of this case. The legal record is closed. The human record is not. McKenzie Shirilla is serving 15 years to life in an Ohio state
Entitlement and
facility.
avoidance of
The parole
responsibility.
board will see her
When
case
asked to
in
state her
approximately
name,
15
Natalie
years from
Shirilla
the sentencing
began.
date, subject to any appeals. A Netflix documentary has introduced this case to an audience that did not follow the trial, and the comments sections are running hot, which is exactly what happens when a case has no clean ending. Here is what this case actually exposed. A 17-year-old who made prior threats that were never reported to any authority, in a state with no mechanism to receive them, on a night that ended with 2 people dead and a courtroom full of families who will never be whole again. The system didn't fail on July 31st. It failed every day before it. Subscribe now, because Mackenzie's first appeal is already in motion.
Shirilla now has a
And when
moment
that
to
ruling
speak
lands,
before her
you will want to have
sentencing.
been here for the full picture. The question the comment section needs to answer: if those prior threats had been reported to law enforcement or school officials, was there a legal mechanism in Ohio in 2022 to act on them? And if not, should there be?
Yes or no?
Make the case.